Picture a grand, uh, just a breathtaking Byzantine mosaic in your mind's eye. It's shimmering with gold leaf, and it depicts these emperors in royal purple, standing really tall and resolute.
Oh, yeah, like the ones in Ravenna. Beautiful stuff.
Exactly. But as you step closer to this masterpiece, you notice it's not pristine. It is subtly, almost agonizingly cracking apart. Veins of darkness are spreading across the gold, radiating right from the very center outward. Pieces are silently detaching, falling to the floor.
Right.
It is a picture of an empire collapsing. But here's the hook for today. It's not crumbling from a hammer blow to the outside. It is shattering from within.
It's a really haunting image, and honestly, it's the exact mechanism of the reality we're exploring today. Because when we look at the slow demise of Byzantium, we have to completely reframe our assumptions.
Right, because the traditional narrative you always hear is about unstoppable outside forces. We picture these massive waves of like Seljuk Turks or Crusader Knights or the Sasanian Persians just battering down the walls of Constantinople until the gates finally give way.
Which is how a lot of history books frame it.
Yeah, but the stack of sources we're diving into today, and I'm talking academic papers, historical chronicles, even some really intense modern Reddit debates, they paint a very different, honestly, much darker picture. We're talking about a slow, deliberate suicide by the state.
That is the core of our mission for this deep dive. We are looking at how a succession of Byzantine emperors systematically dismantled their own state machinery.
Yeah.
They eroded the very foundations of their empire from the inside out, often for just the most petty, personal reasons imaginable.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how these emperors failed so spectacularly, we first have to establish that they weren't flying blind.
No, not at all.
It's not like they were making it up as they went along. They literally possessed the cheat codes for running their empire. They had actual written instruction manuals for survival, and they just consciously chose to ignore them.
They absolutely did. The Byzantine military and political apparatus was an incredibly intellectual institution.
Right.
They relied on sophisticated treatises, most notably the Strategicon, which was written by Emperor Maurice in the late 6th century, and later the Tactica, compiled by Leo VI.
And these were military manuals, right?
Yeah. But they weren't just collections of battle formations. They outlined a highly evolved, deeply pragmatic philosophy of statecraft and warfare.
So what was the actual strategy? Because they clearly didn't want to fight like you see in the old Hollywood epics where two massive armies just smash into each other on an open plain until, one side runs out of guys.
That was exactly what they wanted to avoid. The Strategicon explicitly advocates for indirect warfare. The overarching doctrine was that throwing your army into open hand-to-hand combat is a terrible gamble.
Even if you outnumber them.
Yeah. Even if you heavily outnumber your opponent. The manual advises treating warfare almost like a complex hunt. You use scouts, you lay ambushes, you rely heavily on espionage, you cut off enemy supply lines, and you bribe rival factions to fight each other.
Basically, play smart, not hard.
Exactly. I mean, the Byzantine state was acutely aware of its geopolitical reality. They were constantly surrounded by aggressive neighbors, Avars, Slavs, Persians.
Always putting out fires.
Right. The empire simply couldn't afford to waste highly trained, expensive troops in glorious, bloody standoffs. Preservation of the army was the ultimate goal.
Which brings us to Emperor Maurice himself. And this is where the irony just hurts.
Oh, it really does.
If Maurice literally wrote the definitive manual on cautious, pragmatic warfare, how does a guy like that end up triggering a massive internal collapse?
Well, by completely ignoring the human element of the very army he was trying to preserve.
How so?
So, in the winter of 602, the empire was under severe financial strain. Maurice was looking at the strategic map purely as a tactician. He ordered his troops, who were exhausted from campaigning in the Balkans, to cross the frozen Danube.
Wait, to do what?
To wage a winter campaign against the Slavs.
In the dead of winter?
Yes. From a purely theoretical standpoint, Maurice thought the bare trees and frozen rivers offered a tactical advantage for his cavalry. Plus, it would save the state money on winter quartering.
Oh, wow.
But he completely ignored the logistical nightmare and the plummeting morale of his own men. His commanders begged him to let the troops pull back to warmer territory.
Let me guess, he said no.
He had this rigid, unyielding personality. He refused.
And the army just snaps?
The mutiny was absolute. And this is vital to understand about the Byzantine system. The army wasn't just a tool, it was a political kingmaker. The troops didn't just go on strike.
What did they do?
They elevated a lowly centurion named Phocas, literally hoisted him on a shield, declared him the new Roman emperor, and marched straight on Constantinople.
Wait, his own centurion? Like a guy from the rank and file?
Yes, and the sheer brutality of the coup is staggering. Phocas captures Maurice, and he forces him to watch his own sons be executed right in front of him.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then he has Maurice himself decapitated. They threw his body in the sea.
It's like writing the ultimate best-selling guide to surviving in the wilderness, but then dying on day one because you forgot to pack water.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
You understand all the high-level theory, but you completely fail at the basic, practical application of keeping yourself alive.
Exactly. And the geopolitical fallout from that was catastrophic. Khusro II, the Sasanian king, had actually been an ally of Maurice.
Oh, so he gets involved.
Yeah, when he heard about the mutiny, he used Maurice's execution as a highly convenient pretext to invade the empire. He claimed he was avenging his murdered friend.
Wow, that is incredibly convenient.
Under Phocas, who relied heavily on domestic terror to keep his stolen throne, the entire eastern frontier completely collapsed. The Persians swept in and took vital stronghold cities like Dara and Edessa. The dominoes just kept falling.
So Maurice's downfall was pushing his troops too hard. But as we move forward through these sources, it seems like later emperors failed by pushing themselves into the exact types of open, unscouted combat that the manual explicitly warned against.
Right. What's fascinating here is how the pathology shifts. They stop trusting the system and start relying on their own egos. Take the Battle of Manzikert in 1071.
Correct.
This is widely considered one of the most fatal turning points in Byzantine history. Emperor Romanos, the fourth Diogenes, is marching against the Seljuk Turks. And Romanos operates almost like a walking checklist of what the manuals tell you not to do.
Well, how does a sitting Roman emperor actually get captured on the battlefield? That seems almost impossible if you're following standard operational procedure.
Because he abandoned the procedure. The Tactica stresses the absolute necessity of intelligence gathering. It says never move your main force without knowing exactly where the enemy is.
Let me guess, he didn't do that.
Romanos didn't use his scouts properly. He essentially marched his army blind and fractured his forces. He had no clear idea where the main Seljuk army, led by Sultan Alp Arslan, actually was.
That is a terrible idea.
Furthermore, the manuals advise the commander to remain calm to maintain troop morale. But Romanos' army was already spooked by bad omens, like his tent catching fire. And instead of steadying them, Romanos lost his temper. He yelled at them.
Right, and he insists on leading from the front, which means when the battle turns chaotic, he's stuck in the melee, he gets surrounded, he gets cut off from reinforcements.
Mainly because a political rival in his own rear guard just decided to casually march away and abandon him.
Oh, that is cold. So the Sultan captures him. But here's where it gets really interesting for me. I keep wondering why.
Why he fought that way.
Yeah. If the foundational doctrine for centuries was indirect warfare, why are these emperors suddenly throwing themselves into the vanguard? Was it just sheer ego? Or is there a structural reason they felt they had to play the traditional Roman hero?
That raises an important question, and it gets to the very heart of Byzantine politics. You have to understand how Byzantine legitimacy worked.
Okay, tell me.
It was not like medieval France or England with strict, unquestioned primogeniture, where the oldest son just automatically inherits the crown. The Byzantine concept of imperium was much more fluid.
So it was up for grabs.
Sort of. The emperor was God's vicegerent on earth, but if you could command the army, hold the capital, and blind or kill your rivals, well, you could claim God had favored you.
So essentially, your job is never secure. Any general with a good PR victory could be coming for your throne.
Exactly. Military victory was the ultimate political currency. As the empire shrank and the domestic situation grew more unstable, emperors like Romanos felt immense, crushing pressure to deliver a decisive, traditional Roman triumph to justify their rule.
So they had to look strong.
They abandoned the cautious intellectual warfare of their ancestors for the high-risk gamble of a heroic victory, because their political survival at home depended on it.
And the tragedy is, they just kept doing it. A century later, Emperor Manuel I Komnenos manages to repeat almost the exact same catastrophic mistakes at the Battle of Myriokephalon in 1176.
Yeah, Manuel's failure is perhaps even more frustrating because he had every opportunity to avoid it.
Right, the Turks were literally offering peace.
Yes. He was marching on the Seljuk capital. The Turks had destroyed the forage and poisoned the wells along the route, so his army was already crippled by dysentery. The Turkish Sultan offered a peace treaty. Manuel's battle-hardened veterans begged him to take it.
Because they knew what was ahead.
They warned him that the narrow mountain pass ahead was a death trap, an obvious ambush.
But Manuel ignores the guys who actually fight his wars. He listens to his courtiers instead.
The inexperienced relatives.
Yeah, the sources describe these royal relatives as having, like, beautiful hair and sparkling gems, but absolutely zero combat experience. They essentially goad him into it, saying a true Roman emperor doesn't back down.
So Manuel marches his entire army, including a massive, cumbersome baggage train and siege equipment, straight into a winding mountain pass.
Oh, no.
No advanced vanguard to clear the ridges.
Mm.
The Turks, naturally, are waiting on the cliffs. When they rain down arrows, the Byzantine army is completely trapped.
Just a total slaughter.
The slaughter in that confined space is so horrific that advancing troops are literally tripping over the bleeding bodies of their own comrades and dead pack animals. Manuel engineered a bloodbath purely out of hubris.
Which means we really need to look at what was happening back in the capital.
Yeah.
Because if battlefield paranoia lost them their territory, it feels like the paranoia inside the palace lost them their soul.
Without a doubt.
The emperors were more dangerous to each other than the Seljuks were.
The internal political landscape was exceptionally toxic. Because legitimacy was so precarious, rulers went to horrifying lengths to neutralize threats. Take Empress Irene of Athens in the late 8th century.
Now, I was reading some interesting counter-arguments online, specifically on Reddit, about Irene. Because she's often painted as a monster.
She is.
But some users point out she was a woman navigating a fiercely patriarchal system. She put a lid on the iconoclasm crisis, she stabilized things for a while, and the argument goes, if a male emperor bribed the army and blinded a rival to secure the throne, history might just call him ruthless but effective.
Right, and it's important to report that perspective because that gender double standard is absolutely real in history. However, as an impartial look at the sources, we have to look objectively at the mechanism she used to hold power, regardless of gender.
Right, the damage to the state.
And the catastrophic damage was immense. Irene was officially ruling as regent for her son, Constantine VI. When he came of age and attempted to assert his legitimate rule, Irene orchestrated a coup. She had him arrested and blinded in the very room where he was born.
Which, just to clarify for everyone listening, blinding wasn't just a random act of cruelty in Byzantium. It was a specific political tactic, right?
Yes, blinding was a highly specific political tool. Byzantine ideology dictated that the emperor must be physically whole and perfect to mirror God in heaven.
Oh, I see.
By blinding her son, she was permanently disqualifying him from the throne without technically committing the sin of murder. But to maintain her unprecedented grip on power as a sole female ruler, she had to buy everyone's loyalty.
Right, because nobody fundamentally believes she should be there.
Exactly. So she implements massive, sweeping tax cuts to curry favor with the nobility and the army. This completely hollows out the imperial treasury.
So the state just runs out of money.
The state has no revenue. Furthermore, her usurpation gave the Pope in Rome the perfect legalistic excuse to declare the Roman throne vacant. Because a woman held it, the Pope claimed the authority to crown Charlemagne as Holy Roman Emperor in the West.
Wow. So she basically lost the entire Western claim.
Yes, this permanently fractured the Christian world and stripped Byzantium of its universal Roman authority.
It's like a CEO selling off the company's actual manufacturing plants to pay for a massive internal PR campaign about how great their leadership is. Sure, you buy yourself a few good quarters of loyalty from the board, but you guarantee the company's eventual bankruptcy because you destroyed the revenue engine.
That is a phenomenal analogy. She mortgaged the foundation of the state for her own immediate survival. And that exact same disease, that willingness to rule over the ashes rather than yield power, reaches its absolute terminal stage in the 14th century.
Oh, right, during the Paleologan Civil Wars.
Yeah.
This period is just a masterclass in self-destruction. It's John V against his former regent, John VI Cantacuzenios.
Yeah.
And the lengths John VI goes to for the crown are just staggering.
You have to understand the sheer desperation of his position. John VI has been locked out of the capital and declared a public enemy.
Right.
He has no money, no substantial army, but he is determined to wear the purple. So he starts making deals with foreign powers, essentially using the empire's own territory as bargaining chips.
He makes a deal with the Serbian ruler, Stefan Dusan, basically handing over Macedonia, and then he goes to the Ottoman Turkish ruler, Orhan.
Yes, and this is the fatal blow. To secure Ottoman mercenaries to fight his own people, John VI gives Orhan his daughter in marriage.
Yeah.
And far more disastrously, in 1354, he allows the Ottomans to occupy the fortress of Gallipoli.
Their very first foothold in Europe.
Precisely. He invited the most potent existential threat the empire had ever faced directly into their backyard.
Just to win a civil war.
Yeah. The socioeconomic conditions of the empire were already in free fall, and this constant internal fragmentation meant there was no unified front to repel the Ottomans once they crossed the straits. John VI essentially rolled out the red carpet for the empire's eventual conquerors, all to win a civil war against a teenager.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the demolition crew. Because all of this internal bickering, this hollowing out of the economy, it eventually collides with a massive external force. I'm talking about the year 1204, the Fourth Crusade.
The Fourth Crusade is the tragic culmination of all these systemic failures. The Crusaders originally intended to sail to Egypt to reclaim Jerusalem. They contracted the Republic of Venice, led by the shrewd, elderly Doge Enrico Dandolo, to build a massive fleet.
But they couldn't pay for it, right?
The Crusaders wildly overestimated their numbers. When they arrived in Venice, they couldn't pay the massive debt they owed for the ships. They were stranded.
And into this incredibly tense, heavily armed standoff waltzes a Byzantine family squabble. A young prince, Alexios IV, shows up at the Crusader camp. His father had been deposed and blinded by his own brother, Alexios III.
The blinding again.
Yeah, always with the blinding. So young Alexios IV makes a pitch to the Crusaders and the Venetians.
He essentially leverages a state he doesn't control to pay a personal family debt. He promises them an impossible sum of money to cover their Venetian debts. He promises 10,000 Byzantine troops for their crusade.
And what else?
And most absurdly, he promises to force the Eastern Orthodox Church to submit to the authority of the Pope in Rome.
Knowing full well the treasury is empty and the Byzantine people would riot before submitting to Rome.
It was pure desperation. But the Crusaders and the Venetians accept the deal. They sail their massive fleet to Constantinople, and here the reigning emperor, Alexios III, shows jaw-dropping cowardice.
What does he do?
He actually had a larger army. He could have defended the walls. But the institutional rot was so deep he didn't even try to rally the troops. When the Crusaders start their assault, he simply packs up his favorite treasures and flees the city in the dead of night.
So young Alexios IV is put on the throne, but now the bill comes due. He has an army of heavily armed, unpaid crusaders camped outside his walls expecting their money. So he starts melting down priceless religious icons just to scrape together gold and silver.
Which triggers an immediate revolt. The citizens of Constantinople overthrow him and install a new emperor, Alexios V.
Another Alexios?
Yeah, he actually tries to mount a defense, but the Crusaders are furious. They believe the Byzantines are treacherous heretics who broke their contract. So in April 1204, they decide to just take the city for themselves. They breach the sea walls, and what follows is one of the most horrific sacks of a capital city in medieval history.
The accounts are chilling. I mean, even Pope Innocent III, who originally called for the crusade, wrote a scathing letter when he found out what his army did. He described them hacking silver plates from the altars, violating sanctuaries, and shedding Christian blood in the streets.
The empire was shattered. It broke apart into various exile states. And while a Byzantine emperor did eventually reclaim Constantinople in 1261, the damage was permanent.
It was never the same.
No. The city was a depopulated, burned-out shell. The economic engine was destroyed, the relics were stolen, and the aura of invincibility was gone forever.
It's essentially like hiring a heavily armed demolition crew to remodel your kitchen, refusing to pay them, and then acting shocked when they decide to just bulldoze your entire house and take your TV.
Honestly, yeah.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've traced a line from Maurice ignoring his own military doctrine, to Manuel's battlefield ego, to Irene and the Paleologans trading the empire's future for a few more years on the throne. And it all culminates in the disaster of 1204. It is self-inflicted destruction on a civilizational scale.
It really is. The Byzantine Empire didn't fall simply because the Ottoman cannons were too big in 1453, or because the Crusaders were too fierce in 1204. It was systematically dismantled, piece by piece, over centuries.
By its own leaders.
By leaders who consistently prioritize their own immediate survival, their egos, and their petty family rivalries over the long-term health of the state machinery.
And I think that brings it right back to your own life today.
Yeah.
Because it's a profound lesson in institutional health.
Yeah.
Whether you are looking at a thousand-year-old Roman Empire, a modern corporation, or even a local community project you care about, the greatest existential threats rarely come from the competitors on the outside.
They really don't.
They almost always stem from dysfunction, arrogance, and ignored protocols on the inside. The walls only fall when the rot has reached the core.
That's the enduring lesson of Byzantium, and I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over or explore on your own. Imagine if those Byzantine emperors had simply trusted their own institutions. What if Maurice had pulled his troops back from the winter snows? What if Manuel had just deployed his scouts in that mountain pass? What if the Paleologans had compromised instead of inviting the Ottomans into Europe? Could the Eastern Roman Empire have survived the medieval period entirely?
It's a crazy alternate timeline.
What would the map of the world, the balance of global power, look like today if Byzantium had simply put its ego aside, followed its own cheat codes, and held the line?
It really makes you wonder how many modern empires are cracking right now from the inside out, and no one is paying attention to the mosaic.